have operations that change them from men into women and from women into men. But it's pretty bad and it doesn't work very well. In the future, you'll be able to do that very easily, just like changing your clothes. Identity is going to be one of the major subjects, both in terms of study and in terms of practical implications. The question of who you are, who you want to be, who you're becoming, and who you want to end up as, or whether you want to end up as anyone. In the future, people may have more than one body. Your brain necessarily wouldn't have to be in your body. You aren't your body. You are your feelings about yourself, your feelings about other people. That's your essence. And if that could be transferred into another body, it would still be you. I mean, you might wake up and say, wow, I'm real different today. This is pretty hard to comprehend, but these kinds of things are going to be possible. You could perhaps have adaptations. It might be perfectly desirable to have a much smaller body temporarily. The name of the game is options and freedom. The more freedom you have, the more options you have, the better off you are. By the end of the 21st century, there may be more differences compared to the way we are now than there are between us and the apes. Not just revolution, it's radical evolution as well. We're going to be a new species. This is why we're in the beginning of a truly radical period, and the idea of controlling aging and extending lifespan is just one small part of it. I think it's the most important part because survival is the thing that's most important to me. I now think there are 5 categories of people: hardcore deathists, softcore deathists, closet immortalists, softcore immortalists, and hardcore immortalists. I consider myself a hardcore immortalist. People often say, oh, I wouldn't want to be 20 again, because they think of the way they were psychologically, and I agree. If you're 40, 50, or 60, you never want to be back to the way you were 20, but physically that's something else. When we have people who are physically like they were when they were 20 and 30, and experientially are 80, 90, and 100, you're going to have people who are going to be unbelievable. People have all kinds of fears. If someone is afraid of being brought back to life in a very bad situation where an alternative possibility is to be brought back to be young, fair, and debonair for centuries, and if they're not willing to take that risk, that's fine. They can be dead forever. It's their choice. I think everyone has the right to be dead forever. I think it's an inalienable right, guaranteed by the Constitution and whatever else. There's always a risk, I suppose, if you're frozen, that someone can bring you back as a monster. That's why being frozen is not a very good state to be in. You're totally under the control of other people. Sure, you could come back in all kinds of horrible situations, but people only choose to be frozen when there's no other hope. When my mother comes back, number one, they're going to have to repair the damage to her brain. Since she no longer has a body and her head is aged, they would then, and this will be possible 100 years in the future, they will then grow a younger version of her body around her repaired, youthful brain. There's a real possibility she'll be younger than I am. It would be the kind of reunion that's never happened before. We may become, at some point, more like friends and less like mother and son. It's hard to describe what it would be like. Not only would we have the entire past to discuss, but we'd have potentially an illimitable future. Those of us who survive the transition will remember what it was like to grow old and die and to have traditional relationships between parents, between lovers, between friends. It's all going to be very different. People who grow up to be immortal will not be able to really understand a lot of what we understand because we remember the way it was. They'll also say there were hundreds of millions of people, billions of people who had a possibility of this long and healthy and indefinite life, and almost none of them took advantage of it. Many people, because of the fact that they don't feel in control of their own lives, fear any type of change. There are people who would like to go back 100 years in the past and live in the past. They don't realize that things were really much more horrible than the way you see in the past on television. The good old days were not good. And although it's far better now than it was today, the fact is that we're moving towards far better times.
If in the future you meet your mom again, what would be the first thing you'd like to say to her, you imagine yourself saying to her?
I'd say, Mom, we're now in paradise together and we're going to try for the next form of paradise. I'd say it worked. It really worked. That would be quite remarkable to wake up a couple hundred years in the future and said that 200 years ago they almost slashed your brain into pieces and here you are alive.
By the way, where is your mother now?
I'd rather not comment about that. There's no statute of limitation on murder, and I'd rather not reveal where she is. Just rather not. Maybe in 100 years.